This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jessica, and on this week's episode, Ashley is going to be finishing off her two-part series on the Anthill cult, and I am going to be talking about a man named Daryl Davis. It is a nicer story than Ashley's, so
I have to say that when I first started, I was like, oh, you know what? We haven't done a cult in a while. Let me find a cult. And this cult came up called the Anthill cult. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me read about that and I'll do this. And then I was well into the research when I realized how fucking awful this is. Like, I cannot believe we've never heard of this because it gets so bad, guys. It got trigger warnings all around. There's torture, there is murder, there is some horrible sex stuff. There's some child abuse, child sexual abuse that we're gonna kind of like skim right over. But yeah, so trigger warning for all of it.
yeah.
It's
You
bad.
pulled a Jessica.
I did. I went in hard.
It's awful.
It's so bad. All right. So I got this week from Morbidology, Murderpedia, and Cult Facts, what you need to know. All right. So we left our villain, Roch, for in prison for the death of the child Samuel Gier. And some of his other followers got some jail time, some just got probation. But if you remember, they left that little guy in the hands of the weirdo that they put out in the shed, and he ended up like punching him, and the child died. Anyway,
Gee.
yeah. Moving on. So February of 1984, Roch was released from jail because he only got like 2 years less a day, is exactly what it said. So his followers were still with him, and they were like, hey, we really like the city, let's just rent like a big old place and stay here. But Roch was like, nah, we need to go back into the woods, probably so he could hide what he wanted to do. So they got a lot. Tell me if you know where this is, Jessica. In Somerville Township near Lindsay in Victoria County, Ontario.
Mhm.
You know where that is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where all this took place.
Yeah, city of Kawartha Lakes.
Is that what I said last time?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, did I say that and then forget? He also told his followers that he had stopped drinking and there wouldn't be any more violence, he said. So off they went.
So I have a question.
Yes.
What were his followers doing while he was in jail?
They rented two like apartments in the city, and they all lived within these two apartments, and I guess just hung out and waited for him.
Weird.
Yeah, because remember they were getting the welfare checks. So that's
Yeah.
probably how they were getting their money. They probably were still living like a community, as far as that goes. So they were just waiting for him.
Wild.
Um, yeah, so they went back into the woods and they built a new cabin, and they built a sawmill that Roch fashioned from a chainsaw, a snowmobile engine, and bicycle parts. He also made a horse-drawn treadmill to get water from a nearby spring. They had a little bakery, a smokehouse, a root cellar, a stone sanctuary where they would like have their religious meetings. And what kind of a commune in Canada would it be without a maple sugar shack, which they also had?
Honestly, when you were like, they went back into the woods, I was thinking of the song Into the Thick
That's exactly what was happening.
of It. Make a little lightheartedness of
Yes.
the traffic.
So they built all of this, which obviously is a lot of work. At this point, Roch had two male followers and nine female followers, four of whom were pregnant at the time. And they also had 10 children. So all of those did all of this. And of course, Roch couldn't help because his tummy hurt.
Oh, wait, was it the cancer? Was the
It was
cancer back?
it wasn't the cancer this time, but probably.
Okay.
Well, the anti-violence did not last long, as I'm sure we could have all guessed.
I mean, you kind of spoiled it at the beginning. So.
You know. And they never were violent again, and everybody lived happily ever after. The end.
Yay! Moving on.
So Roch decided to create a hierarchy for his wives. So he ranked them all, and the lowest ranking woman in the commune was Maurice Granier. Remember, she was the one from last time that got two broken ribs from eating the two pancakes, who got her pinky toe cut off by her husband, and hers was the son that had passed. She was also the only woman in the commune who was not like married, I say with air quotes, to Roch. I don't know why. I tried to look to find out why she was the only one. I may be thinking that it has something to do with her son being the one that died and got him in jail. Maybe Roch blamed her for that. I don't know. But she was the only one not married to Roch. She was still married to Jacques, who her husband was when she joined the cult. And Roch told Jacques not to sleep with Maurice, like not to have sex with her. And if Maurice talked back to him or Roch, then Jacques should beat her, even while she was pregnant. He didn't care. Um, Roch also said that Maurice had a birthmark that looked like the number 666. So she was obviously,
The devil spawn.
yes. And Jacques apparently agreed, like Roch talked him into it that, like, yeah, that is like a 666 birthmark. So Roch eventually made Maurice live in her own hut away from the group with her two children.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Like the one woman
Yeah.
that has been stuck with you
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning,
Yeah.
and you treat her like absolute shit.
Yeah. So now that they were in Victoria County instead of living in Quebec, their welfare was figured out differently. And basically, because they were seen by the government as an institution instead of like a family, they were denied welfare.
Good.
Yeah. So without any money, Roch made his wives steal from local grocers everything that they needed. They even had special coats made to have like super big inner pockets to help them steal stuff. But on
Wow.
but on January 31st, 1985, they were caught stealing, and they were told that they were no longer allowed to shop in Lindsay like ever again. So now they don't have any money. They can't steal. So Roch was like, hey, why don't you like guys ask your parents for some money? And it was a great psychological trick because they would either get the money or he could be like, see, your families won't even help you when you need it. Like, that's why you need this family. We're your family.
Yeah.
So either way, it was a
Oh.
win-win for him. And most of the family said, yeah, we'll give you the money if you leave. And they wouldn't. So when that didn't work out super well, the group started actually doing something to make money. They started to sell fruit and pastries, and they were pretty good at it. But because they became good at it, they were no longer like struggling to get by. And Roch got bored. And we all know that's bad.
Really?
Yep.
You're making money and you got bored.
He got bored. So he started drinking again. He stopped working because, again, his tum hurt. And apparently, he has this is a weird fact that I decided to keep in here because it was just weird. He had this like costume jewelry. And whenever he got really drunk, he would go over and over, like he would keep going on and on about his treasures, which was this like costume jewelry. So they're just like, oh, cool, Roch. That's some cool treasures you got there, buddy. So he would also manipulate his wives and like pit them against each other using their self-esteem, like, oh, well, she's prettier than you in this way, or like da da da, and he would hold nude wrestling matches between the women. And sometimes he would have a man, which at this point there's only two men in the cult. So he would have a man stand in the middle of the circle and the women would just like beat him up.
What?
Yeah, and like sometimes he would join in with beating them up, and if he accidentally got hit, you got like in big trouble or something. It's weird.
Okay, a man would stand in the middle and the women were allowed to beat them, or
Yeah.
the other way around?
No. Yeah, the men would there would be a man in the middle and the women would beat the man.
What the fuck?
It gets worse. So here's where I'm throwing in the trigger warning.
Oh,
The following abuse is bad. It's bad, 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 bad. So to he would sometimes, so I read two different things. One, that he would do this to show their loyalty. One, it was like as a punishment. He would have his followers break their legs with sledgehammers. He would force them to sit on lit stoves, shoot each other in the shoulders, eat their own feces and smear feces on each other. Um, they would be forced to participate in purification rituals. So they would be like hit and whipped. He injected ethanol into the stomachs of some of his followers. And as we've heard before, he would also perform circumcisions on adults and children, which I know circumcisions is a very hot topic right now. But these were not like medical circumcisions. These were bad. He would pull out teeth. He pulled out one of his followers, he pulled out 8 of their teeth to treat a toothache that they had. He would perform surgeries on them with using kitchen utensils, pliers, blow torches while they were fully conscious. Most followers, said a quote here is, most followers lost limbs, teeth, fingers, and toes. He at one point decided to circumcise Jacques, but he actually removed the whole tip of his penis. Um, here there was 26 kids at the time. They would also face abuse by him, and he would force them to abuse each other. Scoot past the rest of that. There's also sexual abuse that happened. On January, trigger warning again for a baby death. On January 26th, 1985, Gabrielle put her 5-month-old baby, who was also Roch's baby, out in the snow in a wheelbarrow. The temperature was negative 10 degrees Celsius or 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and the baby died after about an hour and 45 minutes. Apparently, she said that she did this out of an act of mercy because of the beatings that the baby was receiving from Roch. The only reason why I put this in here is because it is significant. So, I mean, obviously any baby death is significant, but like we don't need to hear about all that stuff. But I put it in there because the baby died, it kind of became more government, like the coroner was called in, the police were called in. The county coroner said it was SIDS that killed the baby. But at this point, there's a government group called the Children's Aid Society. You got
CAS.
okay. Is that kind of like our CPS, Child Protection Services?
Yeah, it's exactly like it.
Okay. So they took notice of the group and it led to an investigation. The court ordered an independent assessment, and I am going to name these assholes: Dr. Riel Hinault and Dr. Martin Milajokovic recommended that the children be returned immediately. They said in their 300-page report that they, quote, celebrated Roch's pioneering spirit and experimental attitude regarding sexual education. They accused the government of trying to persecute the group and trying to force them to disband by withholding welfare, which is a gross infraction of their rights as citizens, end quote.
Well, what?
Yes. Thankfully, the CAS did their own report
Wait, who are these assholes?
These were an independent report that the court um, ordered,
Fuck yourselves.
right? But CAS launched its own report. But for some reason, Roch seemed to know a lot about this from the beginning as they were investigating. And he was charming and sweet talking everybody there. But it didn't work, Jessica.
Good. Do they do a surprise visit?
Maybe,
Ooh.
probably. But on October 26, 1987, the court ruled that the children be made wards of the crown. There was to be no parental access because they believed that Roch manipulated the parents and posed a significant risk of molestation and exploitation. The 83-page court ruling also said that the testimonies of the two doctors that said, "Oh yeah, put the kids back," um, and some of the sympathetic CAS agents were all francophones, and they were more thinking that they were being culturally prejudiced and had sympathy for any French speaking community in a predominantly English environment than being actually concerned for the welfare of the children. So it was more like, oh, you're French speaking in an English, like we feel bad for you, like we side with you, and instead of being like, oh, these kids are in trouble. But the court was like, nah, bitch, these kids are out of there. So thankfully, 14 children were removed and put in foster care.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Yeah.
If anybody could see that that was an okay thing for them to live with, especially if they knew about Samuel,
Yeah.
Gabriella,
Her baby. Yeah.
yeah, her baby.
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding
And
me?
all the abuse and sexual abuse that was happening as well to the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had a kind of a hard time figuring out where this fell in relation to the big court case. But I think it was kind of like maybe during this court case, Maurice decided to leave because it
Good.
had been a year since she was able to have any kind of relations with her husband. And, she was put out in this hut and she finally decided to leave. And Roch actually said she could leave with her two children if she left her third daughter, who was almost going through puberty there.
Ew.
Yep. She agreed and left, but while she was out, she went to court to get her third daughter back.
Good.
Yeah. So to do this, she had to testify about the conditions that the children lived in. And she said that only Roch was permitted to express any warmth towards the children. Sometimes he would hold two different women's children over the fire and threaten to throw one of them in. And he liked to see the wives begging for their children. They also obviously did not get an education. In a secret ritual held just for the kids, a naked Roch disemboweled a goat that one of the children had hand raised and bathed himself in its blood. Although once Maurice got her daughter back, she refused to testify in a criminal trial against Roch. So there were no further criminal charges because they had no proof. So, but at this point, they're being watched very closely. And while the children were gone, Roch became even more violent. One day he became mad at Claude, one of the males, for no reason. No one really knows why. And he ordered him to walk around with a rubber band wrapped tightly around his scrotum. Claude,
Why?
I, I have no idea. Claude kept it on overnight, which caused damage to his testicles. So Roch decided, oh, you know what? Let's operate on him. And he used a razor blade to cut open Claude's scrotum.
No.
and plucked out an infected testicle with his finger and then cauterized the wound.
I don't even have a penis, and that is
Yeah. He then held a vote to determine whether Claude should be stoned to death for offending God, which at this point still no one knows what he did.
what the fuck?
But that motion was defeated. So Roch took up a torch and threatened to open Claude's stomach, but decided not to do that. One night in February of 1987, Roch threw a hunting knife at Giselle, creating a wound 3 inches deep in her thigh. His response was to go get another beer and go to sleep. When he woke up 2 hours later, a clot had formed in Giselle's leg, which was like swollen, but not like a blood, like a bad internal blood clot, not like she had clotting around the wound, like it was a blood clot. And he again decided to operate, pressing the leg to cause the wound to reopen. He went in with a red hot iron file and poured cup after cup of boiling water on her leg. A week later, the wound was infected, so he decided to fill the wound with salt, olive oil, and spruce gum. Her leg did start to heal a little bit, and at that point, she tried to escape. But a few days later, she went back to Roch. She said that she had to stay with her husband because it was God's plan. Okay. This next one's real bad. September of 1988, he forced Solange Bolliard to get onto a table naked. She had earlier in the day complained that she had a stomach ache. So he said, well, get on the table naked. And he punched her in the stomach and then forced a plastic tube up her rectum to give her an enema with molasses and olive oil. This is really bad. He then made an incision in her stomach and pulled out a section of her intestine with his bare hands, ripped a piece of the intestine out, and stuffed the rest back in her abdomen. She remained alive until the next day when she finally died, most likely because of the digestive chemicals leaking into her abdominal cavity. Then he said he had the ability of resurrection. So he ordered his followers to remove her uterus. This is after she's dead. And saw off a portion of her skull so that he could ejaculate into her brain and bring her back to life. However, she obviously did not resurrect. And so he then said, well, bury her on the grounds of the commune. But before they did that, he removed one of her ribs and kept it in a leather case around his neck.
You're banned from these stories.
Isn't it fucking awful?
I Nobody can see my face if I'm not talking, but like my mouth has been open this whole fucking time. I I'm getting like the heebie-jeebies. I like when you said that he made them sledgehammer their legs,
Mm-hmm.
still got it. Like,
All right.
oh, this is
One
horrible.
more
Like
really bad
I
story.
I keep forgetting how to breathe. Okay.
Yeah, one more really bad story, and this one's important.
I
So
don't want to hear it.
it's so bad.
I don't want to hear it. Just ignore it,
Okay.
please.
The end.
Thank you.
So Roch got drunk again one night, and
Surprise, surprise.
Gabrielle,
Poor
um,
Gabrielle.
yeah, she had complained earlier that she had like a stiff pinky finger, the one that he hadn't already cut off with wire cutters. She's just like, oh man, wow, my pinky finger is kind of stiff. And he's like,
Can
well,
I'm sorry. I don't like, why would you keep complaining about stuff hurting after what he's doing to people?
I know, I know. So he said, well, go ahead and put your hand on the kitchen table. And he stabbed through her hand with a hunting knife, pinning her to the table. He went to get another beer. And after 45 minutes of her being stabbed, he came back to see that Gabrielle's whole arm had turned blue And he said, quote, "It's not looking so good, is it?" So he went to get a carpet knife and began, quote, whittling her arm away halfway between the elbow and the shoulder. He whittled it all the way to the bone. He was too drunk to finish, so he called another wife over to finish the job. And she took over and took a meat cleaver. Or no, I'm sorry. He ended up taking the meat cleaver and swung at the exposed bone. His first swing he missed, and then the second one he amputated her arm. After this, she fled to a women's shelter, but ended up going back after Jacques asked her to. A few days later, Roch said that her arm was gangrenous, and so he used scissors to cut out the infection. At this point, he also cut off part of her breast and bashed her head in with the side of an axe. She was still alive and she ran into the forest. 2 days later in the forest, she realized that insects had laid eggs in her head wound. So she went back to the compound where Roch was still drunk and tried to cauterize her wound with a drive shaft from a car that he heated up with a torch. I think she went back at this point because I think she wasn't thinking clearly anymore. After this, she fled to the hospital and police were called. They went to the compound and they found Solange's body, and Roch was charged with murder. And he was sentenced to life in prison on January 18th, 1993. Some of his followers still remained loyal to him, and others went home. In February of 2011, Roch was stabbed to death in prison by a homemade knife that his cellmate made. And afterwards, his cellmate went up to the guards and said, quote, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up," end quote. And that's the Anthill Cult.
What the fuck did you just tell me?
This is really bad. We're going to have to put a really bad trigger warning on this one. Like, people should not listen to this episode.
I just almost started crying. Like, I am shaking.
It's so bad. I honestly thought about not finishing this story and just going to something else. But I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, if people have listened to the first part and like, I don't want to be like, oh, the victims deserve their story told, but like they do. And it's awful. And I hated every second of it. And that is not even all of the abuse. Like I really skimmed over a lot of it because I was like, this is too much. So I skimmed over a lot of it, but tried to keep the ones in there that were more significant to the story, like where the cops got called, and then Solange's horrible story because they found her body, and that's why he got sentenced to life in prison. So that's why I kept those horrible stories in there.
Like, I don't know if I'm shaking because I'm mad or traumatized.
It's awful.
I cannot imagine what those people went through,
I know.
and those poor women
Yeah. And the
and poor
children.
men and the children.
Yeah.
I I hate you this week.
I hate me too. And I'm going to put in here in our notes when my story ends so that if they want to skip it and go right to your feel good story, they can.
That's an absolutely wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like vomiting right now.
I don't know where I'm going to get clips for our TikTok this week. I can't use any of that. It'll be all
Oh,
your story.
well, my story is short, so good luck.
All right.
Okay.
Let's uplift this one. And then I've got a really horrible TikTok to tell you about, but I'm going to tell you off air so I don't traumatize all of our listeners too. But I want you to feel my pain because it's awful and I can't stop thinking about it. Go ahead.
Have you not already traumatized me enough this week? Okay. So, not really sure how to segue that one over, but I'm going to talk about Daryl Davis. He is a blues musician, an author, and lecturer, and he has a very unique motivational goal. He, a black man, has sought out members of the KKK and other white supremacist groups while traveling across the United States for the past 3 decades and has persuaded them to alter their ways.
Oh, I love it.
Isn't this great?
Yeah.
But according to Davis, his goal was to become friends with these people rather than convert them. And then once they become friends, they just convert themselves. So it's
Seems
their own
logical.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. According to Davis, he has so far persuaded 200 people to leave the KKK.
Good for him. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so nice. And he always begins each conversation with the same straightforward query. How can you hate me when you don't even know me?
Good point.
Good thought. Daryl Davis, who was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 26th, 1958, grew up with a strong awareness of racism. In 1968, when I was the age of 10, I had a racist incident, he explained. I was in the Cub Scouts and we were in a parade when people started throwing rocks and things at me.
Oh, a 10-year-old
Yeah.
little guy.
Davis initially believed that the Boy Scouts, not him, were the cause of the people's problems. He,
Oh,
he found it really hard to understand that strangers would attack him in such a manner, and he questioned how people could harbor such hatred. Like, he's a 10-year-old boy.
yeah. Of course, he's not going to understand that. Poor little guy.
His entire life, he had that question on his mind. He encountered bigotry once more in 1983 at the Silver Dollar Lounge in Frederick, Maryland.
Oh, hey, that's really close to me.
Nice.
It's where I went for all my OB-GYN appointments.
Lee.
Yeah, that's where I had Miss Mara.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, After the performance, a senior white man congratulated Davis on his music. After some conversation, they agreed to enjoy a drink. Seems harmless.
Yeah.
However, Davis found a few aspects of the experience rather particular and peculiar. Although he contrasted Jerry Lee Lewis to Miles Davis, the man seemed to doubt that Lewis had been influenced by black musicians. Even stranger, the man claimed that he had never previously had a drink with a black man.
Oh, wow.
When Davis questioned why, the man refused to answer. The man's friend persisted, however, and the stranger turned to Davis and declared, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
How terrifying for him.
As Davis recalls, his initial feeling was one of skepticism. He said, I just burst out laughing because I really didn't believe him.
Well,
He
good
then
on him.
he then pulled out his Klan card and gave it to me. I stopped laughing at once.
Oh, yeah, I bet so.
But he kept speaking with the man. The fact that a Klansman and a black person could sit down at the same table and enjoy the same music, that was a seed planted, he said. Davis immediately started to consider a risky proposal. He wanted to visit with additional Klansmen.
That's so dangerous for him.
Yeah. Daryl Davis did just that in the years that followed, and he wrote about the experience in his 1998 book Clandestine Relationships, a Black Man's Odyssey in the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow.
Daryl decided to meet with Klansmen after his experience at the Silver Dollar Lounge. In order to arrange a meeting with Roger Kelly, the Grand Dragon, he
Their
con
names are the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And let's go to court, the podcast I always talk about in here. They've done a couple stories that talk about the Ku Klux Klan, and they make up names. They have like the Grand Crunchwrap Supreme or something like that that they mock them with because it's hilarious.
that is
Sorry,
really
go
funny.
ahead.
No, that's fine. It is really funny. Like,
Their names are so stupid.
yeah. So he wanted to arrange the meeting with this Grand Dragon guy. So stop it.
Grand Dragon.
So he contacted the man he had met at the bar, who later quit the KKK for assistance.
Good.
The man said, "Don't go to Roger Kelly's house. He will kill you."
Oh.
But Daryl was adamant. Even though his encounter with Kelly was difficult, it also marked the start of a lengthy discussion. The first of many Klansmen to do so was Kelly, who eventually left the KKK, closed down his chapter, and handed Davis his old robes.
Wow.
So, how did he do it? To put it simply, he listened and then he asked appropriate, gentle questions. He said, "Allow them to air that point of view, regardless of how extreme it may be. You challenge them, but you don't challenge them rudely or violently. You do it politely and intelligently. The best
Wow.
thing you do is you study up on the subject as best as you can. I went in armed, not with a weapon, but with knowledge. I knew as much about the Klan, if not more, than many of the Klan people that I interviewed. When they see that you know about the organization, their belief system, they then respect you. Whether they like it or not, they respect the fact that you've done your homework. Just like any good salesman, you want a return visit, and they recognize that I'd done my homework, which allowed me to come back again."
Wow. I don't that really shows what kind of person he is because I don't I mean obviously I don't understand what he went through or anything like that. I'm white and so I have no idea what he went through, but I, I don't know that I could be that calm.
Right?
That really shows like what kind of a person he is.
Yeah. Initially, they feel that if you're not white, you're inferior. They believe that Black people have smaller brains, we're incapable of higher achievement. I'll give you an example of what he said. "This guy was an exalted cyclops sitting in my car in my passenger seat."
An
Exalted
exalted
cyclops.
cyclops.
What the
Oh
fuck?
my goodness. The Grand Dragon and the exalted Cyclops.
They're not even like from the same genres.
How do they even take themselves seriously? Like seriously, it's ridiculous.
He made this statement, which I'd heard before. "Well, we all know that all Black people have within them a gene that makes them violent." I turned to him and I'm driving and I said, "Wait a minute. I'm as Black as anybody you've ever seen. I've never done a carjacking or a drive-by. How do you explain that?"
Oh
He didn't even pause to think about it. He said, "Your gene is latent. It hasn't come out yet."
my god.
So, how do you argue with somebody who is that far out in left field?
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded, he said. "I'm just driving along. He's sitting over here all smug and secure, like, see, you have no response." And I thought about it for a minute. Then I used his point of reference. I said, "Well, we all know that all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer," he said.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, sorry. Just kidding.
Oh.
I fucked that up. Then I used his point of reference. I said, Well, we all know that all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. He then said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, name me three black serial killers." He thought about it. He couldn't do it. I then said, "Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, John Wayne Gacy." All whites. I said, "Son, you are a serial killer."
Good on him.
He says, "Daryl, I've never killed anybody." I said,
It's
"Your
latent.
gene is latent."
Yeah.
It hasn't come out yet. He goes, "Well, that's stupid."
Yes. Yes, it is.
I said, "Well, duh, yes, but you know what? You're right. What I said was stupid, but no more stupid than what you said to me." Then he got very, very quiet and changed the subject.
I bet he did.
5 months later, based on that conversation, he left the clan. His robe was one of the first ones I ever received.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Some people disapprove of Daryl's strategies. However, Davis thinks the work he's doing is significant and producing actual palpable results. When two enemies are talking, they're not fighting, he said. In his words, the conversation gives him an opening to ask probing questions, to hammer at the cement of hateful ideas. He didn't convert anybody. Like, they did that themselves. It
Mm-hmm.
was their choice. They did what they wanted with that information and went from there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you have to think, like, with this first guy that he got his robes from, 5 months after his
Yeah.
interaction, he hung
Yeah.
up his robes. It wasn't right away,
Mm-hmm.
it took time.
It was something that he sat on and thought about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Daryl keeps these robes in his home as a reminder that the work he's doing is good work and is actually making a difference.
Good for him. I'm glad he feels so
So,
good about it.
yeah. So that's my short story. I'm so sorry it was so
No,
short.
it was very much, much better than mine.
And of course, for my sources, I used all that's interesting and I used an interview from NPR.
Oh,
Yeah, but that was my happy story.
yeah, very uplifting.
Yeah. Anyways, you got any jokes for me?
I don't. Do you have any?
Nope. Give me a second.
Yeah, same. I'll get one. I'll get one.
I don't know why we're like really bad at this
Always. We know we do it every time.
every time.
Uh, why shouldn't you tell secrets in a cornfield?
I don't know.
Because there's too many ears.
I knew it had something to do with that because I was like, they're called husks.
What do you call a sad cup of coffee?
A depressor? Why are snails slow?
I don't know why.
Because they're carrying a house on their back.
Oh, I like that. That's very cute.
Why did the teddy bear say no to dessert?
Why?
Because she was stuffed.
I like that too. That's cute.
And uh, why did the soccer player take so long to eat dinner?
Why?
Because he thought he couldn't use his hands.
Oh.
So lame.
Well, if you want more of us lovely ladies, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok and Patreon. We're
Oh
everywhere.
my gosh.
We're everywhere.
Ashley is ramping up her game. And if you would like to rate and review us, you can do so on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And we have a little announcement coming up too in regards to the podcast. So stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. I know we keep saying that, and then we keep like saying stay tuned again, but stay tuned.
It's exciting shit coming, okay?
We do. We
So,
got some exciting stuff. So, all
yay!
right. Well, we thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to bringing you two new stories next week.
Bye.
Bye.